Hi, I'm Isabella da Firenze, and I'm going to run through some Shibori techniques. Now, the basics of the techniques that I'm going to show are historical in nature. However, I'm mostly using some more modern materials just to for ease of access and whatnot. The kinds of shibori I'm going to show you today, I'm going to show you some folded shibori, some stitching, and then two different kinds of what's called binding shibori. There's close wound and open wound, and I'm going to show you both of those. So first is supplies. So I've got here, this is some white silk that I bought. It's in a width that would be a traditional Japanese loom width, which are much, much smaller than Western modern widths there. And then I've got some thread. If I was trying to be fancy with this or more historical, I would probably use some silk thread or linen or something like that. I've just got some very basic, what is this, Coats and Clark thread. I've actually got it in white and black because I think the black will show better when I'm trying to show things. So I'm just going to put that one aside because I think I'm going to use the black. I've also got these popsicle sticks. These are just spare popsicle sticks that I've kept around, and they're really good for binding and folding in the folded shibori. You can also use clamps. I might have some. I might grab them. I might pause the video and grab them in a bit. But yeah, clamps are also really, really good for keeping those tight seams so that the dye doesn't get through. I've got some elastic bands. You can also use thread. It works the same way, just thread sometimes breaks. And then I've got just these fancy decorative rocks that I bought for a planter, and they're not necessary. They just make some interesting things happen. You can use marbles. You can use anything kind of round and really any shape, any kind of object that you don't mind either getting dye on it or will wash off easily. So, and then I've got some needles for the stitching ones. Got my scissors as well. So I'm just going to cut just some chunks of this because I don't want it to be. I don't want to do any particularly big pieces because I don't want to waste that much fabric. So we're just going to do that. Just do a couple of these up. Okay, so for folding shibori, basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to limit the surface, with any of this really, you're trying to limit the surface area that the dye will have access to. So for something like folding, you can do all sorts of things with it, but you want to make sure that your seams are tight and that whatever you're using to seal it so that, you know, it doesn't get in, whether you're tying it shut, whether you're putting the popsicle sticks over and binding it that way, you want to make sure it's all kept really tight. So this is just a very, very simple little pleat I've got going on here, and I'm actually going to fold it in half this way and see what happens. One of the really fun things with shibori is experimentation. Sometimes it'll work out, sometimes it doesn't. But that is all in the fun. The more you practice, the more you kind of get used to what your designs are going to do. And with some of the forms, you have a lot more control, such as stitching. You have a lot more control with stitching. And with some of the binding ones from later. So I'm just tying the elastic bands on here so that I get everything nice and tight. So the goal is that all this middle part in here, like all of this exposed bits, will be dyed, but once it gets kind of towards the center of what I've done, the dye will be hopefully non-existent, but at least less, because all of this tension will have kept it. Should have done this one first. There we go. Would have kept the dye from reaching it. This is especially true with indigo, because indigo involves oxidation and doesn't just permeate the fibers too well. So, got a nice little bundle there. Put that one aside. Let's see, what other kind of folding can I do? This is just where you want to kind of let your creativity shine a little bit. By the way, the difference between kind of folding and binding shibori in this place, because this does look a lot like I'm just binding the fabric, right? Binding shibori is more about, at the very least from what I've seen, tying, like you're using the string, so it's a lot, you get a lot more narrow sections that are undyed, as opposed to these broader ones that I'm gonna get. And you'll see what I mean more when I get to the binding ones. So we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, and yeah, I'm just gonna use another. I'm actually gonna do it this way. Maybe I'll get an interesting little diagonal out of it. This is just a chance to be creative. And yeah, like I said, you can use popsicle sticks, you can use clamps. I've used clamps. You just like put them on, kind of like the elastics are doing, except depending on the kind of clamp you're using, you'd have a lot of a tighter seal. You know what? I'm going to do something weird, and I'm going to do this. Now, obviously, this center part where the popsicle sticks meet, that's going to look interesting. And this may not actually work all that well, but we're going to see. This isn't for anything in particular, just to show what is possible with shibori. I don't want to break the popsicle stick, so let's just be careful here. But yeah, what shibori can do. Okay, for this part, I am going to be doing the binding shibori, style, and this, I don't want to do this one. I'm going to cut this in half. This one is slightly different from the folding, as I'm not going to fold things first, but I am going to use, this is maybe not the most traditional. It's possible that they did some of it this way, but I haven't found any sources in particular about doing it like this. But I'm going to take a few of these. Like I said, you can do this with marbles or something. I'm going to take some elastics. I'm just going to kind of bundle up that. Oh, get the elastic. And we're just going to do this. You want to make sure that it's tight, because again, you don't want the dye getting through. And depending on what you wrap in here, you can get some interesting designs as well. Let's try another one. You can just do this however you please. And everybody's will turn out different unless you follow the exact same methods and are very precise about it. I am not that kind of person. I like just seeing what I get out of these. Now, you want to make sure that the elastics you use, if you're using elastics, are fairly small, depending on what you're doing, of course, because you're going to be twisting them a lot like this so that you get them as tight as possible. Oh, I can fit one more in there. Let's do one more. Okay, there's maybe one more on the side here. I've got a little bit more space for the tiny one here. Don't want any part to be particularly left out. Maybe does this work? Come on. This may not work. There might not be enough fabric here. Oh well, worst case, it's going to get dyed blue anyway. Now, if you're really good with things like spatial patterns and whatnot, you can map out what you want things to do. There are some amazingly talented people in the world who do shibori, and the art they produce is just astonishing. I am not one of those people. I also have I happen to like simple patterns, if we're going to go with patterns. Oh, I missed a spot. That won't do. I like simple patterns, so the next one I'm going to show you, which is a version on some of the oldest shibori known in Japan. I actually like it the best because it's not particularly fancy. It's very repetitive, but there's something about it. To be fair, anyone who does this seriously they do things like they measure it out. They'll, they have it down. I am just seeing what happens. Okay, so that's another one. Let's go with, we're gonna go with this one. So this is pretty classic shibori. You take a length of thread, like I said, silk or cotton or linen or whatever's available. This is just all-purpose, what's it called? Polyester. Yeah, all-purpose polyester. But for this, depending on what you use, you're going to want to be careful, because when I use silk, it snaps when I pull it too hard. But you also have to pull it hard enough that you know the resist will take. So what you do is, let's see if I can get closer to the camera for this. You're going to want to take little bundles. Then you take your thread and you wrap it around, pulling tight. This is the close wound type of binding. You could probably, this is the same you could do around the rocks if you want to do it that way. But you don't bind it off or anything. You just move to the next spot. Where am I going with this? I guess I'm going this way. It has demanded I go this way. Go to the next spot. Wind that. And the more or less you wind, or the more or less space is covered by the thread, the more or less dye will get in there. And you can do, you know, bigger chunks or smaller chunks. Just keep cognizant of where your thread is, because it will just decide to pop off on you. And there's a beautiful trick at the end of this that I will show you after the indigo video. But the basics are just that, because all of these are connected like this, and I mean, if you run out of thread or you snap it, it's not the end of the world. Because these are bound so tightly, you can pretty much just, as long as it's not unraveling, and if it is, you just tie it off, like just tie it to itself. But as long as it's not unraveling, you can just continue on to the next thing. And then when everything is said and done, because they're all attached, you just kind of tug at it. You don't have to cut all these. You just kind of tug at it, and it all snaps and comes off on its own, which is just fantastic. Now, this is time consuming, as you can probably gather by how long it's taken me to get a row and a bit. I'm just gonna miss some fabric. Just go over here. Oops, and I'm out of thread on that side. Okay, so I'm just going to tie this off here just to make sure it doesn't slip off on me. You don't really need to tie it super tight. You don't want to tie it super tight. You just kind of want an anchor. So you can just leave the thread like that. Take your next thread. And you don't want super long threads, because it'll just get tangled. It's like embroidery. You want smaller chunks that aren't going to get in your way. Okay, so as you can see, kind of bundled that all together. It starts to come together in the back there. I don't want to pull on it too hard, because this will just come undone. but there's that. I'm just going to move up a bit. I'm not going to do this whole thing. It would be really cool, and I might do one off camera just so that you can see it when it's done, but I think it's going to be too long for the camera. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with a closed one here. Then I'm going to try this open one I've seen. I haven't tried it myself yet, but it looked really cool. It's more of a, it's like an open wound one. Okay, so I'm going to start kind of down at the bottom here. And the way it described it, you kind of just, like, you want to go tight, but you're trying to do, it's less wrapping it around itself and more just binding parts of the fabric, but like it's a little more spirally than the other ones. So anyways, there you've kind of got the two types here. You've got your just the camera, like your close wound, tightly done ones, and then some open wound ones where the dye will get in a bit of a different way. I'm gonna adjust that, and hopefully we'll end up with something interesting on those. I'm actually going to include, I forgot about this when I was saying what kind of shibori I was going to do today, but this one, it's one I learned in a more modern class I took, as opposed to reading about the historical versions, but it's also a lot of fun, in my opinion. It works a lot better if you have like something really flowy, like cotton or muslin, kind of gauzy material, and it's what the teacher referred to as the cloud method. Just reminded when I was talking about storm clouds and arashi. But what you want to do is this piece too small? This piece is too small. I'm going to save that piece for another thing I'm doing. Oh, hey, I'm out of fabric. This is great. So that'll be for the other piece I'm doing. This will be for this one. So what she did is you just kind of, you want to like take some and just kind of twist it up. You just want to make all of these twists and bobs and stuff. Again, this may not work because I don't have enough fabric, and or it's too heavy for this to work. I'm not sure, but we're going to try. So anyways, that's kind of the cloudish method. You just kind of put as many elastic bands on it as you can, tie it up real tight, and hopefully in the center there you get kind of a fancy swirly pattern thing. Okay, welcome back. Here we are at several days later. And as you can see, we have all of the shibori pieces done, and they're, for the most part, dry. This one feels a little like it might still be a little damp, but it's not going to bleed through, and that's the important part. So I'm gonna take my time and unravel a few of these to see what we've got. Let's kind of do it in the same order as before. So I'm just gonna put these to one side. So this was the first folded shibori. I'm just going to pull off these elastics. And that, you can already kind of see how there are places where the dye hasn't come through. Okay, so not like a stark difference, but definitely a difference. Where you have the, straighten this out. You've got the slightly paler blue where not as much dye went through. I could probably get that a little more contrasted depending on how many times I dyed it and all of that. And you can see some, it's a little bit uneven, but still pretty cool. The next one of our folded, which I don't have high hopes for. We'll see what happened with this one, but I was definitely doing odd stuff with it. So, okay. Oh, that's a really interesting pattern. Again, some more light blue rather than white, and some interesting kind of scalloping over here or something. But that's definitely, again, interesting pattern. Oh, and on this side you can see how there were some discrepancies in the dye. Again, almost, some of these almost look like, I don't know, butterflies or something. Like here, kind of looks like one. Pretty cool. Let's see, this was the next one we did with the rocks inside. So I'm just gonna undo this. So you can see the rock still not really covered in dye at all. It's black still. A little bit of residue on it though. Okay, and that's all of that. So as you can see, the spots and the rings are where the rocks were. And you get this really cool kind of, let's see if we can do this closer to the camera, really cool kind of wavy effect here around the edges of these. Okay. Next, we had, this was the little version of the close wound and open wound ones, which I did do a full one, as I showed in the indigo video, but I'll save that one for last. So this one, it's not going to be as impressive with the other one, but I'm going to see if I can show it on here. I'm just going to tug all of those strings, come loose. I will mention that I did make a mistake in the previous Shibori video when I talked about how to do this, I completely forgot that there is a knot that you can tie around each of those to secure them in place. I did a bit more reading as I was writing some stuff up, and had completely forgotten about that part, so that's my fault, but it helps do the same thing. Even though it's knotted on, it will keep, it'll let the strings just pop off like this. So we've got the little ones down here. These are the Nemaki close wound rings, thread resist rings. And then we've got kind of the open wound ones here, which have a much wider kind of pattern. If I can actually hold this steady, here we go. Bit of a wider pattern on those ones, which is really cool. Okay, I'm going to go into the stitch shibori now. I have no idea how this one's going to turn out, but we're going to find out. Let's see, how do I don't think this one has a fancy way of undoing it, so I might just have to cut it. Okay, so on this one you can see it's, if I can get it up here, it's a very, very, especially because it did seep through a bit, but it's a very, very subtle difference in the color there. But you can do some really cool things with thread this way. Make a lot of different patterns and stuff. Okay, let's try the cloud one. Oh, now that one's neat. So let's see if I can spread it out far enough to get it all on camera. But see how it's just that kind of puffy, almost cloud-like in its form. That's really nice. I like that a lot. I like how it's not, because it's so random, it's just, you can't plan for it. You just get what you get, and I like that a lot. So, and now for this piece. So this is the full close wound piece I did, where it's all attached. So the traditional method, obviously the Japanese would be doing much larger pieces than this, and so you'd get actually two people out on each end of a large length of fabric. And what they do is they'd each, like, you'd have one person holding these corners, one person holding these corners, and they would tug on diagonals to make all of the threads pop. So I'm going to try that, and we're going to see how it works with just me and just this one small piece. So again, it's probably easier with like the longer fabric and stuff. So I'm going to go in here and just pull off some of these. But it's a nice way to just have to deal with all of these. And it's also probably easier if I'm using the silk thread that does snap very easily, as opposed to this polyester, which is made to be a little sturdier. Already collecting all of the thread. Still attached, okay. There. So yeah, I'm not really like yanking on it super hard. A couple of the little more stubborn ones I am, but so that's all of the thread just in one chunk that has come off. And this is what we're left with, which is all of these rings. This thread resist ring shibori, also called nimaki, which can be done with thread or it can be done with bamboo as well. But this is what I hope to be doing the entirety of a Japanese kosa day in. A little more planned out than this, but this is the other side, just for reference's sake. But yeah, the kosa day is a little more planned out than this. Yeah. So that is the end. I'm adding this to the end of my Shibori video because it matches that, even though I did the indigo dyeing in between. And so thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed it.